Folks, this is probably going to be the best news yet. Talk about a blue wave. It's never been seen like this. You have Pierre Poilievre, according to a new poll by Innovate. They have taken over. The Conservatives have now a majority lead in Ontario, which is quite literally the make or break of this entire election. We have a breakdown of each single province. Absolutely bananas. You also have Mark Carney, who's not only losing confidence and support by the mainstream media, but he's been exposed to everybody. Like, he's flat out been lying about Donald Trump. This is insane. And then you have Jagmeet saying, begging everybody to vote for him so that he can have, according to his own words, a coalition with the Liberals. Like, this is insane. This is probably the best video. So before we get into it, guys, I do really want to encourage you guys. All I care about in this video is for you guys to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because you are going to feel, you're going to leave this video, if you watch from start to end, you're going to feel so good about this election. But still, the job is not done yet. I want everybody to go out and do what you got to do and vote, man. We all got to get out and vote. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, like I said, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's just get into this. Positive vibes only, folks. Positive vibes. And before we get into it, I do actually have this special message. The news moves incredibly fast, and with the election right around the corner, it's not just about keeping up, but it's all about seeing through the noise. Narratives, they shift by the hour, and in a media landscape full of spins, how a story is reported is just as important as the actual story. This is where Ground News comes in. Ground News is a website and app designed to address these exact issues. Each day, they pull in thousands of news articles from around the world and organize them by story in one place. And for each story, you'll get the visual breakdown of the political bias, reliability, and ownership. Take this story on the Conservative platform's $100 billion in proposed measures over 4 years. There are roughly 50 different sources covering it, and the overwhelming majority of the coverage shows the left, making this a blind spot on the right. The Red Deer Advocate, a left-leaning outlet, ignores the economic impact entirely and focuses on perceived anti-trans elements. I guess economic policy wasn't exciting enough. Meanwhile, the Ottawa Citizen, which leans more to the right, it takes a different track, highlighting how the platform pledges to trim bloated bureaucracy, something that we could use more than ever, as new government jobs are basically the only form of economic growth in Canada. If there's one feature I think everyone should be using right now, it's the blind spot feed, which it shows you stories that one side of the spectrum isn't covering at all. Stuff you literally wouldn't know existed if you were only getting your news from one source. As someone who covers news in politics, I know how important it is to look at stories from different angles. Ground News helps me through the spin and get the facts for myself. And it's no surprise that they have over 10,000 5-star reviews. If you subscribe through my link in the description or use the QR code, you'll get 40% off all unlimited access Vantage plan. That's the same plan that I use. Visit ground.news/sun to subscribe and take control of how you see the world. That's ground.news/sun. Now let's get back to the video. All right, so Jagmeet Singh is desperate, and it is hilarious. In this video, Jagmeet Singh is saying, if we give Mark Carney unchecked power, we won't be able to stop him.
And if we give Mark Carney unchecked power, we won't be able to stop him. We won't be able to stop the cuts to healthcare or the creeping privatization. We won't stop the weakening of environmental protections. We won't stop him from ignoring workers like the thousands who lost their jobs in March. And if we're told the only way to stop Trump's influence is to give up what we believe in, then what are we defending? So when someone asks, why vote NDP, you tell them this. Because this election isn't just about stopping something bad. It's about fighting for something better. For public health care, for affordable homes, for good union jobs, and a country where no one is left behind.
And if you don't vote for Jagmeet, he's going to turn around and threaten to beat you up. The guy's an absolute maniac, and here he is in this next clip, quite literally admitting to a upcoming coalition with the Liberal government.
You talked a lot about what your offer is. Can you tell us what your red lines would be if there is a minority government and the Liberals are the party with the most seats in the House? What are the non-negotiable things from your platform that you would tell Mark Carney, if you want to remain Prime Minister, these are the things you need to do?
Well, we laid out some of these priorities already in one of our announcements, but I can lay them out again. The key priorities we have that we need to see action on in this next budget is that we cannot have any cuts to our health care. We're not going to stand for any cuts to health care. That's just not allowed. You can't cut health care in a time of a health care crisis. Like here in Alberta, people are going through a health care crisis. Imagine how much worse that would be with over $28 billion in cuts at the federal level. I mean, that would be devastating to our health care. What would that mean to nurses and doctors and family physicians where there's already such a shortage? So no cuts to health care.
No cuts to healthcare. I mean, Pierre is certainly not suggesting cuts to healthcare. There's so much mis and disinformation out there about Pierre. But there you go. You have Jagmeet Singh quite literally wanting to do another coalition. But it might not actually matter because it looks like Pierre is going to be taking the lead here. As per this poll, new innovative research poll has the Conservatives leading Ontario. So you can see on the left, you have Conservatives and the Liberals, NDP, blah, 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 blah. So in BC, Conservatives are apparently up to 40%, Liberals at 37%. In Alberta, Conservatives have a sweeping majority of 57% and Liberals have 28%. In the prairies, somehow the Liberals have a lead of 49 to 32, but in Ontario, you have 41% for Pierre and only 38% for the Liberals. And then, of course, in Quebec, it's either going to be a toss-up between the Bloc or the Liberals. And according to Innovative Research, you have the Bloc only at 30, the Libs at 38, and you have Conservatives at 21. So, ladies and gentlemen, based off of that trajectory, that would be enough for Pierre to win the election. Now, that doesn't mean the job is done. We all have to get out and vote. I personally already did my early voting on special ballot since I'm not at home in my own riding. And bring a pen. Bring a pen. It's not a conspiracy for you to bring a pen. It's literally on the Election Canada website where they recommend that you bring your own pen. So just keep that in mind. But folks, this is looking good. And adding more fuel to the fire, Carney is literally imploding his own campaign. He's been going around saying that Trump has stopped calling or referring to Canada as a 51st state, yet that isn't factually correct. He's caught in a lie here. This is so embarrassing. Let's take a look.
On March 28th, did President Trump bring up the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state during that call with you?
As I just said, the president brings this up all the time. He brought it up yesterday. He's brought it up before. There's a difference between the conversation that was held between leaders of government, which was this conversation, and a discussion that led directly to an agreement that as sovereign countries, we would have negotiations about our partnership following the election on Monday. That's what the president and I agreed. That's what both of us reported back. And that's what I'm ready to do. And what's at stake in this election is how well we come together as a country for those difficult discussions with the Americans. And to be clear, you know, I have said well before that call, and virtually every time that I've spoken since that call, that President Trump, the Americans, want to break us so they can own us. Those aren't just words. That's what's at risk. That's why we have to build Canada strong. That's why we have to go hard. That's why we have to negotiate properly. That's not why we have to build outside options. That's why we have the plan that we do.
I asked you about.
That was a whole lot of nothing. If you're wondering what the heck did he say, everybody's scratching their head going, what the heck did he say? And it sounds like the reporter's about to say, you didn't answer the question, sir.
about this on March 28th after the call, and you said that President Trump respected Canada's sovereignty both privately and in his public conversations.
He did.
Were you being truthful?
He absolutely did. He absolutely did. Look, the president has certain things in his mind that he reverts back to all the time, but treated me as the prime minister, not as something else. I'm not even going to say the word he used to use about my predecessor.
Governor Trudeau.
Treated me as the prime minister. We had discussions as sovereign nations. We agreed as sovereign nations that these negotiations will begin after the election on Monday. And that is how it was reported back, and that's absolutely accurate. So that's the treatment. Now, look, the president says lots of things, but the essence of the discussion and where we moved the conversation to was exactly what I said. Treated us with respect as a sovereign nation. We have these negotiations coming, and that's, just to be clear, that is what's at stake. Both things are true. The desire of the Americans and the president to own us, those aren't just words. That's a desire. And the ability of Canada to stand strong, build our own, control our destiny, and in that context, as a sovereign nation, have those discussions.
Prochaine question. Next question. In respect to your colleagues, next question.
Ooh, this is not good for Carney, man.
C'est presque la même question.
And then he just goes in French and says the same thing. That is not a good look for Carney. And I can't help but smile. And it doesn't just end there with that press conference. You actually have mainstream media, who I refer to as the bald guy from CBC, because that's what we're going to refer to him as, since he's going to be defunded very soon. He's now reporting how Mark Carney has been misleading Canadians. Carney has based his entire campaign around this pitch. Uh-oh, he's losing the support from the state-funded media.
The CBC's Ashley Burke is following Carney's campaign this week. Ashley.
David, Liberal leader Mark Carney faced questions today about if he was being truthful and transparent with Canadians about his call with Donald Trump last month. After the two leaders spoke on March 28th, I asked Carney about it. He said Trump respected Canada's sovereignty in his private and public comments. But Radio Canada learned Trump did bring up the idea of Canada being a 51st state on that call. After being asked by journalists today about it, Carney confirmed that's true, but said Trump brings it up all the time and that during their call, the U.S. president absolutely did respect him as prime minister and respect Canada. He says they both agreed as sovereign nations they begin negotiations after the election about its economic and security relationship. Now, Carney has based his entire campaign around this pitch that he says he's the best one to take on Donald Trump and win the trade war.
The CBC's
He's gonna be all lie. Not good for him, especially not good that it's this close to the actual election. I think people are gonna have buyer's remorse for voting for Carney. You're never gonna get that with Pierre. Now let's take a look at this other clip of CBC that is also reporting on the 51st state comments and how it's not really looking that good for Carney.
All right, friends, we have breaking news on the federal election. It's a new revelation coming to us this morning that underscores how U.S. President Donald Trump remains at the center of the campaign with just days until the vote. Now, the report is coming from our colleagues at Radio Canada, and it's about Trump's conversation last month with Mark Carney. Sources are telling Radio Canada that Trump talked to Carney about Canada becoming the 51st state. That is something we did not hear from the Prime Minister's office after Trump and Carney spoke on March 28th. And as he signed executive orders in the White House, Trump himself spoke about his call with Carney.
I've spoken to the current Prime Minister. He was very, very nice, I will say. Very nice. We had a couple of very nice conversations, very good. But I don't think it's appropriate for me to get involved in their election.
Now, that is the end of a nearly 2-minute-long answer to a BBC reporter's question about whether Trump had any prediction on the outcome of next week's election. Trump replied that he did not want to do that, but in an answer to a question about tariffs on Canada, he repeated his claims that Canada is not viable without U.S. trade. CBC's Janice McGregor leads off our coverage from our Parliamentary Bureau in Ottawa. So, Janice, walk us through all of these developments.
Yeah, and there's so many grains of salt here that we have to sort of apply liberally, including to what Donald Trump himself said, because he was suggesting that there had been multiple conversations between he and Mark Carney. In fact, we know it was just that initial one, which people might remember happened at the end of that first week of the campaign. All had been relatively quiet on the White House front. That may have lulled some people into thinking that this campaign was going to end talking about different issues than it had started. But of course, things do seem to be looking at another disruption here. Mark Carney's closing arguments to voters this week were already trying to refocus, remind people on Canada's coming battle with Washington. Last night, speaking at another kind of boisterous rally with his supporters in Surrey, he had this kind of fresh ammunition to put to them.
As he made clear once again today in the Oval Office, President Trump, he is trying to break us so that America can own us. Yeah, that's the answer. That's the answer, Donald. That will never happen, ever.
Yeah, he's right. Pierre Poilievre will never allow Canada to become the 51st state. Look, Carney is caught in a lie. He's a liar, quite literally. Like, I don't know how many more videos of scandals need to happen, but it's not even month after month or week after week. It's actually day after day. And when are people going to realize that the same liberal corruption is happening? Quite literally, like what it says on my microphone, Trudeau 2.0. Now let's shift away from Mark Carney and talk again about Conservatives. It kind of looks like Doug Ford is waiting to maybe put his hat in the leadership race for the Conservative Party. And kind of interesting, because I don't think he would get the same support that Pierre does. Pierre's a conservative. I mean, Ford is a liberal, very much. And look at his weird, shit-eating grin, man. Super, super forced.
I was busting his chops with Scott Moe and myself. We're busting his chops this morning. I can't tell you, but I told him I love it.
People are interpreting it as maybe dipping his toe in the waters of testing a potential future CPC leadership bid. What do you think of that?
I love. Well, you know something. Let's see what happens. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's see what happens on the 28th. But that's what I can say about that.
So there you go. It looks like Doug Ford is trying to get Mark Carney, and he's kind of been indirectly endorsing Mark Carney for a very specific reason, because he wants Pierre to lose so that he can basically overtake Pierre as the leader of the Conservative Party. Not a good look. Like, I'm able to connect the dots quite easily. I'm sure a lot of other people are also able to do that. Let me know down in the comments if you think this is a little bit weird from Doug Ford, but we shouldn't have that much need to worry about it, because it's, again, looking like Pierre is going to actually win this thing, folks. I'm so freaking excited. Now let's take a look at Tom Mulcair, and what he has to say about the election and the gap closing.
News political commentator and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair. Tom, it's always been fascinating to follow the polls daily throughout this entire campaign, and they are suggesting the gap is narrowing on the preferred prime minister and overall support. What do you think is resonating right now for the Conservatives to show this?
they've been pushing strongly. They're well-known themes, talking law and order a lot, using the type of thing that helped Mr. Poilievre pull ahead of the Liberals back in the day. But let's not forget that this is a Nanos poll, and Mr. Nanos himself is very clear when he says that the Liberal vote is much more efficient. In other words, better spread out and more efficient in terms of winning seats. Scott, let's recall that in both 2019 and 2021, in those two general elections, the Liberals got fewer votes than the Conservatives, but more seats. And that's the way it's going to line up again. The other thing is, too, with regard to, preferred prime minister, to be 9 points ahead is quite a lot. And what that means is the universe of potential voters, of people who see in Mark Carney the person they'd prefer to be prime minister, helps them continue to draw votes away from both the NDP. We've talked a lot about them having a lot of difficulty in being in single digits, but they're also drawing a lot of votes away from the Bloc Québécois. So much so that Yves-François Blanchet for the past few days has been trying to completely change his messaging on Tout le monde en parle on Sunday. He said, it's obvious that Carney's going to win, but he's now suggesting that he could play the same role with Carney that Jagmeet Singh played with Justin Trudeau. In other words, be there to prop him up. He said, put in lots of blocks so we can make sure that Quebec stuff can still block anything when we want to, but allow us, to work with Carney. It's wishful thinking. I don't think anybody believes him, but it's interesting to see how he's had to change his tune as this thing has evolved and as he continues to bleed off votes towards the Liberals.
Do you notice something with Canadian politics? All parties, other than the Conservatives, are wanting, they're not even concerned about winning. They're wanting to just have enough seats to be able to block Pierre or whoever wins. Like, it's so weird. Pierre's just focused on winning and wanting to better this country, as a true patriot would say, and everyone else's goal is to just block him. It's so weird. Like, I can't believe this is a real thing. I mean, Jagmeet wants to do another coalition, and the Bloc is saying they want to do another coalition. I mean, for crying out loud, we just got to get out and vote, man. We got to create this blue wave. I'm telling you, we're going to be so much better off.
The wild card through the entire campaign, of course, is coming from south of the border. How is Trump factoring into the election at this point? Once again, we saw from comments last night taking aim at our sovereignty, talking 51st state again, and even potentially escalating auto tariffs. So now with just days to go, how could this factor into what we see and the messages we hear on the campaign trail?
Well, there are three big changes that happen that helped dope the Liberal campaign and push them way ahead of the Conservatives, who had been 24 points in front of them. They were the arrival of Trump, the departure of Trudeau, and of course the selection of Mark Carney as the Liberal leader. Across all of that, the shadow of Trump has been influencing everything. So we're even finding out that indeed they did discuss, Trump raised the 51st state nonsense, and apparently, Carney would have said, well, we'll agree to disagree on that. And he was pushing the thing forward. Now, the fact that it's coming out now is not unhelpful for the Liberals, because it reminds people that the ogre south of the border remains the ballot question. Of course, the Conservatives would have loved it if yesterday Mr. Trump hadn't mentioned any of this stuff, because they would have been able to continue to push their themes. But I think it's a reminder that the ballot question is Donald Trump, the tariffs, the threat to Canada's sovereignty, and who can best deal with that. And that, of course, plays in favor of Mark Carney.
CTV News political commentator. And
I see, it depends on where you go. It depends on where you go to get your information. Again, that's why it's important to make sure that you cross-check, not elbows up, but that you take information from different sources to make sure that you have all of the information available, which again is another great reason to check out the link down below in the description, or the pinned comment below, or the QR code that was on screen. And I'll put it up again right now for those that can go to ground.news/sun. Get yourself 40% off and go and check out the news for yourself so that you can make sure that you are getting all of the information. The election is right around the corner. This is so crucial. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, it'd be super awesome for you guys to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all later. Bye for now.